Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello, welcome to the fourth Ulrich virtual program that accompanies the Ulrich Artists and You Community Billboard Project. I'm Leslie Brothers, Director of the Ulrich Museum of Art, and I'm here with Jana Irwin, our Head of Education, and Ksenia Gerstein, our Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art. We have an exceptional program for you this evening, presenting Hank Willis Thomas and Dr. Debra Willis. The billboard featuring Hank's work, I Am a Man, is located at 308 Northwest Street. I hope that all of you have had a chance to see the billboards. There's a new round going up this week that will make 15. And if you haven't had a chance, please go to our website, and under current exhibitions, you can click on the Billboard project page. There you'll find a slideshow of the current billboards. You'll find a map with locations, a link to the portal where all the works featured so far are identified and described. You'll find information on the Smartify app and Jed Bodwin's curated playlists on Spotify that are intended to enhance your billboard viewing experience. The Billboard project has been generously supported by lead sponsors Mike and Dee Michaelis and Emprise Bank. We have additional individual support from Lee and Ron Starkle, Georgia and Keith Stevens, Don and Ellie Skokin, Dr. John and Nancy Brammer, Karen and John Hagman, Jeff and Janice Van Sickle, Tammy Bradley and Nancy McMaster, Rick Muma, George and Eleanor Lucas, Dr. Pat Purvis, and Laura and Craig Thompson. Thanks to all of you. I'm imagining you're all out there. Thank you so much. We continue to fundraise for this project, so if you're interested in being a sponsor, please let us know. We also received 2 generous grants to support this project, one from the Kansas Creative Arts Industries Commission, which awarded us funding from the National Endowment for the Arts, and the other from Humanities Kansas. We're grateful to these organizations and very proud to be associated with them. It is now my pleasure to pass the screen to Ksenia Gerstein, our curator, who will introduce our wonderful guests this evening.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome again. I see that we have quite a few people here, and I think we have some people on Zoom webinar. We also, I think, might have some people on YouTube Live, and so welcome to people on both platforms. I'm just going to say a few words to introduce our speakers and then pass the screen on to them. So it's my pleasure and honor tonight to introduce our 2 speakers, Hank Willis Thomas and Dr. Debra Willis. They've both spoken at the Ulrich before, not virtually in person. And I'd encourage you after this program is over, when you have more time later, to go to the Ulrich YouTube channel and to look up the recordings of those talks as well that we have there. We're thrilled to have them back with us and to be able to host them tonight in conversation. So, Hank Willis Thomas is a multimedia artist who was educated at New York University and the California College of the Arts with photography as his main medium. His work touches on themes of personal identity, African-American history, and the representation of both in American popular culture, and he'll talk quite a bit more about that tonight. And it has been exhibited internationally, including at the International Center of Photography in New York, Guggenheim Bilbao, and Musée de Quai Branly in Paris, among many other venues. His works are also in the collections of many major institutions, including MoMA, Guggenheim, the Whitney and the Brooklyn Museum in New York, the High Museum of Art in Atlanta, and the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. He was the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2018, the AGO Photography Prize in 2017, and the Soros Equality Fellowship also in 2017. And his work is currently on view in a large traveling retrospective titled Hank Willis Thomas, All Things Being Equal, which originated at the Portland Museum of Art, or Portland Art Museum, and traveled to the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in Bentonville, Arkansas, and is now currently at the Cincinnati Art Museum until October 11th. And I want to note that we are very proud lenders to that exhibition with the work I Am a Man that's also on our Ulrich Community Billboard project. Dr. Debra Willis is an artist, photographer, scholar, and curator of photographic history, as well as an educator. She's the professor and chair of the Department of Photography and Imaging at the Tisch School of the Arts at New York University. And she's the author of co-author of nearly 30 books on photography and visual culture, with another book coming out in the very near future. With her earliest publications dating to the mid-1980s, when her writing and scholarship on the intersection of photographic history and African-American history and visual culture were really pioneering and opened up paths that she and many, many others have continued to pursue to this day. Her awards include a Guggenheim and Fletcher Fellowships in 2005, a MacArthur Fellowship in 2000, and a 1995 Infinity Award for Writing from the International Center for Photography. She's also a curator. Exhibitions she's curated have toured widely, both nationally and internationally, and she's a practicing artist. Her work has been shown at a number of US galleries, as well as at the Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art in Kansas City. In terms of logistics, our speakers are going to talk for about an hour. It's going to be a little bit longer than it has been in our past programs because we have two speakers and we want to give them both ample time to talk and to be in conversation with each other. And so around 7 or a few minutes till, we'll open it up for Q&A, and you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen in Zoom in order to ask a question. For people who might be streaming this through YouTube, there's also a function there that allows you to ask a question, and Jana will monitor that and pass the question on to me, and I'll read it out for our speakers. So with those preliminaries out of the way, I will stop my video, and hopefully Dr. Willis and Hank will start theirs and we'll begin.
Great, thank you. Let's see, is Hank joining us now? Good. So we are happy to be here and to discuss the work and share our stories as artists and interested in telling the experience of creating art through joy, through difficult times, and the broad history of photographic memory. Okay, do you want to, should I start the screen? Do you want me to start the PowerPoint at this point, or do you want to just introduce the work? Hank?
Oh, me? Sorry, Mom. How are you? Hi, everyone. It's so weird to just be looking at my mother and talking to other people digitally. I mean, I just want to talk to you. So
Okay.
you otherwise do whatever you want, Mom. You know, just tell me what to do. It's nice
Okay.
to see. Hi, Ted.
So do you want to talk about your creative journey, your experience as an artist, how you began and your collaboration as an artist?
I got it. How about you talk to me about your connection to Wichita, Kansas?
Okay, thank you. I'm really excited to have that memory in my experience based on my mentor, Gordon Parks. Gordon Parks has been central to my life as an undergraduate student, as a child of interest in reading his work in Life magazine, in growing up in my mom's beauty shop and seeing his work as a journalist, but also the way that the respect that he had for making images. I had an opportunity to speak in Wichita a few years ago, But I also remembered as a result of that experience and working with Gordon over the years is that as an undergraduate student, I had the opportunity to send him a letter when I was working on a research project on Black photographers. And he responded and invited me to his apartment in New York City to talk about his history and share that history. Fast forward, after I graduated, I worked as a curator at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. And as a result, I found images that were in the collection at the Schomburg that had not been processed in over 30 years. And working through the collection and processing the collection, I worked with Gordon closely. And at the same time, he shared the many stories. Of course, I've read most of his books, but it shared his story about growing up in Kansas. And that really enhanced my interest in our relationship, which continued as a mentor friendship as well, but also how important it was for family and to talk about beauty and resilience in that history that we explored as mentor-mentee relationship.
And did he ever talk to you specifically? I mean, like about his time there or what it meant for him? Like, because I know his archive is held at the Wichita State University, and that was when I first went there to speak. I was most impressed and most affected by but the fact that his entire archive was there, like his letters, his books. I wonder about that decision to house it there.
Yeah, a number of people were asking Gordon, I remember in the 80s, for his collection or to consider, the Schomburg or considered different places to house his collection. We know that the photographs are at the Library of Congress. We know there are photographs in different places. But having the forethought that Gordon had his archive from family photographs to unpublished drafts to receipts to his time in living in St. Paul. So early life is part of that history. And the fact that he decided to think about his legacy, he understood his work and to consider his legacy and the importance of the future, that he was way ahead of his time in that sense. So with the collection in Wichita, and then the collection that's at the Gordon Parks Foundation in Pleasantville, New York, he understood what it meant to make a difference in not only in the world of photography, but in the daily life of a working artist and photographer. The way for me to enter into his work was, of course, reading his biographies, autobiographies, but also to know that there were primary documents that I could touch, look at, review, exhibition spaces that I could explore, and having that in his home state meant a lot to him.
Yeah, growing as a child are my most memories of Mr. Parks and him coming to Schomburg and us going to his house and looking at his work. And it never occurred to me that this was something unique, special, and or historic. And also, I only saw him in New York and maybe in California. And realizing as I got older that he was from Kansas really reshaped my understanding of the African American experience. And I found through his first film, The Learning Tree, a story that had about young Black people in America that I even to this day I hadn't really seen on film. And to think that him being the first Black filmmaker to do a Hollywood studio film um, as late as 1969, and that he chose to tell a romantic story about childhood with like incredible beauty and patience, um, really suggested how he was, really focused on shedding new light on the Black experience through the images he created.
Yeah, I remember seeing that book. I mean that I didn't read the book, but seeing the film and how he visualized color, using color photography at that time. His cinematography was just amazing. He had close-up portraits. He understood light in a different way, that in terms of lighting Black skin, just in terms of lighting the prairie, just seeing the landscape of Kansas in a different way. There was also hidden histories of terror, but also of joy. And that was really a central way to tell a story of a man who, just to think about, I think of Tyler Mitchell's photographs as I want to make you feel good. And where young boys are, in the park and playing. I can go back to just looking at the images that Gordon Parks made of the young boys playing and focusing on what it meant to be a preteen and running through the prairie. And so that experience as well was another story of looking at how to explore portraiture through moving images. And that's central.
So can I share my screen with you?
Do you want me to share or are you going to share?
I'm going to share.
Okay.
Of course, I thought, as you know, Mom, I change my mind all the time.
Okay.
Even though I just told someone I don't change my mind all the time. So just caught myself.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about this really recent work that I did as part of an exhibition at the Gordon Parks Foundation, where I was given access to his archive of images and really applied my lens and my way of working to it. And it was, I think, for me, very humbling, exciting experience. I'm really grateful to Peter Kuhnhart and the whole team at the museum, I'm at the foundation, for giving me that opportunity where I got to look at his images. He had a thing where he would go back to places from his childhood and childhood memories and make these incredible photographs of them. And this is a lenticular print where when you're looking at from one way that you can see the text Exodus, and then it becomes blurrier and changes as you walk around it. And I didn't know about this concept of the exodusters being the first Black people who migrated out of the South to a promised land in Ohio, I mean, in Kansas. And within the show, with the show, I was really interested in the early cinema and color film of that time, and wanted to make images that talked about kind of the challenges, the rough side of his childhood, but also this kind of story of like what happens outside of the frame. So he's actually making images, and these are some of the set photographs where you could see all of the kind of things that had to come together to tell this part of his life. And then there are like images like moving too fast, like this, which are like and it's really unclear who took these photographs, the set photographer or Gordon Parks, but they actually are all like in his mind. And so I did a series of collages trying to highlight that. And this, and so what you can see, you're looking at the same image. This is what it looks like to the naked eye. And if you take a flash photograph, it looks like that. And this image is an image that we found in an archive of early Black migrants to Kansas. And, we don't really know much about the young family life of Black people in the early 1900s, and the kind of the beautiful stories and the life that isn't just depicted by violence and abuse, but the story of people finding home and creating home and building community, and how perilous that is with all of the storms and the wind and the dust, and the ability and the need to kind of make home in a country that hasn't fully welcomed you, yet it also stole you from everything you know. I wish I could see this one bigger. Oh, this is, and I started to really, as you know, much of my work is inspired by people that you introduced me to. So Gordon Parks, but you also introduced me to the work of Andy Warhol. And I decided to try to, as I looked at the film, and this is a part where one of the young boys in the film was wrongly convicted of a crime, and this is him in jail, and there's like an abstraction in the piece To the Naked Eye that reveals the kind of always prescient horror of mass incarceration today. And I can't imagine, being an artist, although that can like so powerfully tell the story of their life um, 40 or 50 years later. And I think that's now one of my goals. Like, how do I talk about a moment before I knew much about the world with a level of clarity and vividness? And this is kind of, the police officer who kind of, or the sheriff who kind of basically, intimidated and abused the boys throughout their childhood in different ways, but also had some redemption in the film as a hero. But I didn't think about this kind of cinematic and kind of landscape of Black people on horses, and a culture where post-slavery, where people told their own stories and made their own lives. And so I always wanted to highlight that, because the work that I have that's on the billboard at the at the at the museum, which I don't think it's in the deck that you have. Can you share your screen, Mom?
But just to follow up on your narrative there, that experience of a storyboard, how Gordon created a storyboard, which is like diaristic in a sense, and the fact that the sense of personal memory and the experience that he wanted to share through that experience of the film. When I saw the images from your show and how he recreated a hurricane or different experiences about space, I'm always thinking about Kansas and Dorothy,
Yeah,
Wizard of Oz. But looking at it through the lens of Gordon and the movement of the people there, there's a story that is unknown to us based on that. So do you want me to try to walk? I think maybe it could be in here, 16.
Well, let's go back to the first one, because I wanted to, well, actually, yeah. Well, so yeah, this is a show that I had following through the research that we did for the show at the Gordon Parks Foundation. I really became excited and fascinated with early Hollywood cinema, and at Kane Griffin Corcoran Gallery in Los Angeles, the show was called An All-Colored Cast, where, again, through your work, I was exposed to this concept of separate cinema, of segregated film, and that in the black and white film era, it was literally often Black films or white films, and there were very few white people in Black films, and in white films there were very few real Black people in those stories. And I found it somewhat ironic and fascinating that the era of integration coincided with the era of color coming to television, and the same with the era of pop culture and color, color theory and color field painting. And
Mhm.
so I was in the show, I looked at color bars and thought about segregation as color bars, and again in Black film and cinema, and then looked at different images that talked about color and different paintings, etc. And then I used retroreflective vinyl material I use often to expose new things. So on the left is what this piece Spectrum 9, based off of Ellsworth Kelly's paintings, um, becomes a colorful rainbow collage of all of these uh, Black starlets from the 50s and 60s, um, or yeah, this uh, harmony and color, looking at this element of a iconic film, Ana Lucasta with Sammy Davis Jr. and Eartha Kitt. What is it? What memories does this bring up for you? This image and these films?
It it was an important time for me as well. When I was in school, in undergraduate, just having the experience of looking at the history of Black cinema, and then having the opportunity to collect and process these images at the Schomburg Center. So building up a strong film history of storytelling through a range of narratives from actors and actresses who were influential in some of the, as we used to say, the first Blacks on TV, through the Ed Sullivan experience. But also, Anna Lucasta was one in terms of an important important theater piece in Harlem at the American Negro Theater, which was popular and popularized through the Schomburg Center and that history. But also, what was fascinating for me was also to look at images of beauty and of women of color during that time. And Anna Mae Wong was one of the early actresses, as well as Eartha Kitt and Josephine Baker, were one of the early actors on film, and also to see their beauty, not only as exotic, but also beauty as a way of referencing their artistry. So here, the way that you have incorporated Anna Mae Wong in this exhibition just really, it's just so lovely and just so beautiful in the way that she's able to look back at the camera. So that exchange of her gaze as she understands where her history and the broad history of her experience as a model and quote in film history, as well as in advertising and art. So these are some of the ranges of actors that you have incorporated in this color field, as we say. So here are some selected works that you have also that's in the exhibition that's opening in Cincinnati.
Yeah, my service show is opening at the Cincinnati Art Museum on September 2nd, which feels a lot further away than it actually is. I can't believe it's just in a few days. And
what does this reference here?
Well, yeah, this is uh, uh, a quilt using English football jerseys based around a Matisse paper cut collage called Reverie, and it's from his jazz series. And I started to think a lot about how sports is often a metaphor for war. And it's also largely, as we know it, a result of colonialism and industrialization. And that soccer, for instance, what we call it in the United States, was a direct result of um, finding ways to entertain uh, factory workers in places like Birmingham and Manchester, England, which is why a lot of the teams are, like Manchester United, it's because they were eventually unionized factories. And where were the cotton factories and steel factories, but the cotton largely was coming from the United States. And I've been fascinated with how Jersey and synthetic and also organic material worn by Black bodies has a currency in there. Not just Black bodies, but especially Black bodies has a currency of its own. And thinking a lot about flag quilts and
Why quilts and applique and quilts? How did you get interested in,
I don't know, Mom. How did I get interested in quilts?
I don't know, you tell me.
Mom.
So,
Because my mom was making quilts.
right.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Basically, all I do is whatever you did, and I just like couldn't figure out any new ideas. And
Just in terms of the Matisse applique and cutouts, and then incorporating sports and working closely with ways of different surfaces, you're opening up an engagement with the viewer in a different way. It's just not the material, but it's also, ways of looking at the experience of the imagined person wearing the jerseys, or the experience of the town in Manchester. So the range that you have in storytelling. So here again, you have another project in terms of looking at.
you skipped the mirrors, Mom.
Huh?
You skipped the mirrors.
Oh.
Yeah. I love talking with my mom because it's to people who I can't even see. That's the first time we've ever done that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
So I get to be more immature while also realizing that some people are watching me. What a fascinating experience.
I don't know this work here.
Yeah, you've seen this. This is one of my mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
And can you read it?
It says stay black and live.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so
What do you take away from that?
The surface is
it's all mirror. There's two types of mirror treatments, so that you can, when you look at it, you see yourself in it, and it says "Stay Black and Live." And people from various ethnicities and identities can relate to that in one way, shape, or another when they experience this work. I'm having not seen this piece and being in the current moment in light of recent events. How do you interpret "Stay Black and Live"? Been asked that, but
right. It's a cautionary, and it's both a hopeful message. So that's something that I see within this. And then you say silver and black. Is, we think about, is that the experience of photography as a silver gelatin, or creating silver to make a mirror, but also the way that it's kind of a reminder of what's going on in the world today, and basically be proud of your experiences. So that's,
I think that there are things in words in our mind like Black Death, and that blackness is often in our language seen as something that we should run away from or feel bad for or bad about. And I think the "Stay Black and Live" for me is like a reminder that you don't have to change your essence, so to speak, to to survive. You know, that in fact, maybe if you change your essence to assimilate too much to a culture that doesn't want you, maybe that's not life at all. I don't know, but
Yeah, it has that. It has that too. It resonates that, but it also, as you think about looking at images, it also forces you, the reader and the viewer, to think about new narratives about how do we use text in our work, and how do we use signs of messages to consider our lives. You know, how do we listen, and to think about the public and the personal aspect in this image. You know, so in here with this image, the silhouette, it's like the target um, on a range, on a range.
yeah, I just think about target practice, and again, in light of the news, too often, you know, it seems that it literally is practice, and some people take that into a charge that they might need to perform this violent act on, um, much like these targets, defenseless uh, individuals and objects. You know, and I think there's some the fact that we study ways to kill through weapons, um, lethal weapons that are designed to be used at range is something that I am really trying to come to terms with as someone who grew up, you know, loving watching TV where they're at the shooting range and they're shooting and shooting and shooting, and you know, even as a child, you know, learning how to shoot rifles and the joy and the power of having a gun. Yet the metaphor for how they're used now, not to get food, but actually, and often not even in self-defense, yet instead to cause harm, not only by obviously police, as we've seen also in the news, but also the incredible rise in gun violence like on others and on ourselves throughout this pandemic.
You know, it's a difficult and complex experience to think about target practice and what does that mean, and why. And that's another experience that I think that a difficult history that we should also begin to look at, and ways to think about this aspect of the accurate shot in that experience. So here you are looking at also iconic images of the past. And this is a title of the history of white women in advertising.
Yeah,
100 years?
these are two images from a series called Unbranded: A Century of White Women from 1915 to 2015. And it was a series in which I found old ads, one ad for every year, looking at a specific demographic called quote unquote white women. And I removed all of the advertising information to look at what was really being sold. One thing that we forget about marketing often in advertising is it's designed to encourage us to enforce and believe in stereotypes, and the stereotypes around how women's bodies should be shaped and how they can be seen as desirable, what is modern. And this is on the left, it's an ad from 1956 for corsets, well,
Mm-hmm.
and but that were not, they're synthetic instead of whalebone. And it says step into the modern age, and this is this caveman dragging this woman gleefully into the modern age by her hair
Mm-hmm.
as a way to sell clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the right is from 1976 for suntan lotion featuring an 18-year-old Christy Brinkley, model actress. And I think what the ad is saying when you remove the advertising information is because it's like it said like the savage touch or something. And so of course, if you're if you're a blonde woman and you get a nice tan, you can then find the savage in yourself, which means that you're darker, swinging from a vine with cowrie shells. Um, and that was a way to buy products. And so I'm
it
really,
also reveals a really hardened history that's based on being objectified in different ways. So that's the other aspect of it. This image to me is just a powerful moment of reading history and reenactments of a photograph, and how do you make a three-dimensional photograph that made in another country to tell a story that's also part of this story in this country. So when we think about this horrific experience of a photograph that was made by South African photographer Ernest Cole, who is documenting Black men who are being inspected, who worked in diamond mines, and that they were stripped, hands up, and to see if they were hiding any of these, treasured gems. I'm just curious, how did you make the connection of this memory from the diamond mine to hands up here in this country, and how in terms of creating this?
yeah, well, um, I truly believe that all of us are psychic in some way. I feel that when a person makes art intentionally, in any form, or if you make food, or if you make, if you write anything, or start a business, you're really living in a future that has not yet emerged. And Ernest Cole, going around South Africa photographing sites where it was prohibited or banned as a way to hide apartheid, and then sneaking his negatives outside of the country so that people could see the horrors that people were living under, was actually living in a liberated South Africa. And I think when he sent these images, much like Gordon Parks, those are messages to the future, right? The photographs that we take, and the humiliation and the horror of these in the photograph, completely naked Black men lined up facing a wall, was something that always kind of affected me deeply. And I decided that I wanted to give them a new life in the sculpture. And so I remade it as a sculpture, and I cropped it at their shoulders, and I titled it Raise Up. And to me, it's really about exaltation, and then about reverie and baptism. That was in February 2014. And as we know, in July 2014, Michael Brown was murdered. And the rallying call in this protest in Ferguson, Missouri was hands up, don't shoot. And so when I finally showed this piece in the US in December, people were referring to it as the hands up, don't shoot piece. And I was always, I haven't gotten over how something that I made based, based off a photograph from 50 years earlier could speak so eloquently to something that was about to happen halfway across the world. And wondered if that's something that happens more often than we think, that, our subconscious is picking up on something that we're afraid to acknowledge or admit, and then it becomes a revelation.
And you also transform the concept of Black male identity in multiple ways in creating this. And it's now on in a public display now at the
National Museum for Peace and Justice at the Equal Justice Initiative.
So here are some of your public artworks.
This is the one. I was so grateful that the Ulrich Museum bought this series. It was, I feel like, my favorite series I've ever made.
Yeah, I love this series as well.
It remixes the iconic "I Am a Man" signs that another photographer named Ernest Withers that you introduced me to from Memphis, Tennessee took during the Memphis Sanitation Workers March, which is where Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I always like to read the top line as a timeline, because we cannot forget that when the United States Constitution was written, that African Americans were counted as 3/5 of a human being. And it touches on very specific moments in our history. But I really like to read the last line as a poem all the time, where it says, "I'm the man, who's the man? You the man, I am man. What a man, I am human. I am many, I am I am, amen."
Yeah, so it's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And just in terms of a central way of stopping people, the way that it's mounted on top of this car wash. So we can imagine the multiple range of people with various voices who enter the car wash experiencing these words and what they're thinking about it. So when you think about community billboards, what an ideal place to have this billboard is at a car wash.
Mm-hmm. And then this is a sculpture, Unity, that was first displayed in November 2019. It's a bronze cast of 22 feet with an arm with the finger pointing to the sky. And it's quite simply about oneness, unity, and in the spirit of the Statue of Liberty, which is meant to imply that all are welcome. And this has been a site of gathering around the protests in New York since late May, when George Floyd was murdered by the police in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I can't, and it's truly humbling and, not something that I quite even know what to do with.
Yeah, but also just metaphorically, the way that it's placed under on the street, but also where there's no U-turn, no left turn. So it's kind of like, like the hand is going straight up, the finger is going straight up. So there's kind of metaphorically, it's another way of looking at how this experience is kind of, what we have to face and facing that through that image. And this piece also is Love Overrules. It's in San Francisco. And it's a narrow street that this is on. So I'm just curious about how did you decide this location and what does Love Overrules mean?
Well, I didn't decide this location, but it was,
You didn't? Okay.
It's Annie Street in Mission. It's right above the California Historical Society. And as you know, downtown San Francisco has a lot of tall buildings. So I think Dorca Keene and the YBCA community invited me to, that's right, maybe I did choose it. They had all these spaces that artists can do temporary projects in potentially. And I found this wall that I thought was like a billboard wall. And I realized that there's not that many spaces in public for people to read words that aren't telling you to buy something. And as you know, my cousin Sangha, famous, last words were "love overrules," and I wanted to make a monument to his spirit, and that's where we're looking at that light.
And so here is the public monument and of the
Raise Up.
Raise Up.
Were we supposed to do questions soon?
I have one. We have one more, and we have 2 more minutes before the question. So I wanted to see if you wanted to say anything about the Four Freedoms Project, and then we can begin to think about responding to not only the billboards that we experienced here, but to think about inviting artists to create billboards, using words, placing it in communities, and what does it mean to talk about connecting freedoms in different ways. So we could stop here and open up for questions.
Is it okay if I join you guys? Would it be easier if I think you probably see the Q&A, the questions as well on your screen, but I can read them.
They're missing. I have to stop sharing screen, and I really like to have that image up there. But if we want to,
could you?
I see. Okay, well then I think let's leave that's perfect. Let's leave the image up, and then I'll read the questions, and you guys can answer them. So we have one question from Dale Small, who is asking, Hank, what role does abstraction play in the creation and then presentation of your work? What decisions do you make when it comes to your process of abstraction?
Well, abstraction is an intellectual language that I have not explored in depth. And because I come from photography, and there is definitely abstraction in photography, but it's still mechanically produced by and large. And as photography has changed so much over the past 20 years, I've kind of become more and more drawn to work that doesn't fix you in a moment in a space and time as easily. So what happens with the mirrors that there are, abstractions created by the way that you pour or spray the silver, or with the retroreflective pieces, which I'm really in this combining the spirit of an abstract painting with an iconic photograph from a film. There's a marriage there and I'm hoping to continue to loosen up and believe that I can actually put the thought into making the way that abstract artist does. I say that because, it seems so easy at first, and then you start doing it and you're like, uh-oh. So I hope to be able to, make.
I also see another question that kind of relates to the art process. How long did it take for you to make the I Am a Man project? I mean, you're looking at the history of 3/5 of the man, so you're looking at also historical images, but how long did it take for you to make that image? And that is from, I can't see right now.
It says anonymous attendee.
Okay. And then Gregory Walker says, you guys are funny. This is a great conversation.
An anonymous attendee, thank you. The question is, I think I'm still trying to make that work. The series was definitely a result of my mom being friends with this photographer and seeing those photographs so often. And in 2008, when Barack Obama was elected president on the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King, there was an awareness that a lot of people had about that being a historic moment. And so right around that time, I would say that I started to think a lot about how I could use or remix those signs, and then probably didn't make anything of it until December of 2009. So I guess you could say a year. I worked with a professional sign painter to actually paint them for reasons that I don't know. I just felt like having a hand a hand based on that is trained towards perfection painting them was better than doing prints. That being said, I wish I had prints.
Okay, so Leslie Decker asked, can we see some of Deborah's work? I did not include work in this conversation, but I just in the back, you can see there are images that part of a project that I created called Reimagining. I'm rethinking this the 100th anniversary of the women right to vote. And so I decided to create a clothesline and asking the question of how women as activists, as domestic workers, as family members, when they are actively working to make a difference and change society, that they're also working in the home. And so they still have to do domestic work. And so I think that the aspect of the right to vote and getting women out to march and to talk about it, it happened in the beauty shop, it happened in the backyard in the clothesline. So this is a way that I'm sharing this through that experience of the clothesline. And just in terms of, there's another question, has any advice to how to agitate the archives, how scholars can reimagine the ways we approach archival research? I'm also, the question can be for Hank as well. I don't know if I'm reading the whole question, but we both love the archive, and I probably happened working at the Schomburg Center because there are so many untold stories, and the untold stories is how can we, as this person, Rachel, as you asked, how can scholars can reimagine the ways we approach archival research? It's just like that question is answering your own question. It's like how to use a photograph. You know, when you look at a photograph, you want to think about the reference of dress, the time, who's in the photograph. Just the fact that how a letter is used within typeset, how typeset is used during that time period. So I think it's really part of creating, as you say, a new life and breath in your research. It's also just asking the question that you haven't heard asked before. And I think that that's a central way of looking at the archive. And there's a question, can both or either of you please talk a bit about consuming versus viewing Hank's work, especially by white or Black audience? I'm not sure what the question means, but we view the work, and in terms of Hank's work, or when we talk about consuming work in a different way as a modifier, I see that we believe in the work. And so how do we consume work and ask questions about it? How do we view work and walk away from it? So we ask that question of how important it is to see Hank look at the work from the artists who decided to respond to the 4 questions, and then have contemporary artists look at what does freedom mean today through migration, through family, through the idea of consuming cultures like Thanksgiving and sharing multiple experiences in that way. So I think that that's, the viewer can be active or passive, and consuming could be kind of that intellectual exchange that an image could have in interrogating the experience of looking and viewing. So I think our time is up. And so we'd like to say thank you for this experience.
Thank you. I don't know if Ksenia was going to come back or.